Good evening, folks. The clock hat's on tonight. So, first of all, somebody asked me about my knowledge of the Beatles in one of the comments. Yes, I'm pretty good with Beatles trivia because I saw my poster back there. But I suppose you'd think I have nothing in this little, cave of mine that has anything to do with Caitlin Clark, but you'd be wrong about that. So, tomorrow I'm hoping to show you some pictures, but I've got some news tonight from Boston. And I've got some news that I think is very much indicative that we are close to a Caitlin Clark return. Okay. And I think it's being played very cagey, but I think there's a reason for that. And I don't think it's a malicious reason either. So, first of all, news from Boston. This is very interesting. The minority owner of the Boston Celtics, as you know, Larry Bird played for the Boston Celtics for 13 years. In fact, he started his career here and he ended it here. Now, the minority owner of the Boston Celtics today purchased the Connecticut Sun, or agreed in principle to a purchase of the Connecticut Sun for $325 million. Now, not my favorite WNBA team, but, there were rumblings in town that once Caitlin Clark came to town, they would end up having a Boston franchise here. So here's what I don't know. I don't know that they're actually going to move the Connecticut Sun from Connecticut to Boston. None of that is defined as yet. But one thing you can bet on, they will be playing games here. And one thing you can bet on is when Caitlin Clark comes to town, I have every intention of being in the TD Garden. Okay. Just as I was on June 15th, on July 15th, I'm sorry. But again, let me say this. All of this movement going on with the WNBA, everything you're seeing, like constant articles everywhere on the internet, in the papers, everywhere. Okay. Now the movement towards bringing franchises to different cities. This is all, and it can't be denied anymore, the Caitlin Clark effect. Okay. This town was jumping on July 15th. I mean, look, yes, it was billed as a Connecticut Sun home game because the Connecticut Sun is a New England team. But I've got to tell you that there were more Indiana Fever shirts and more Caitlin Clark shirts in the building than there were Connecticut shirts. And this town, the streets were just completely filled with people. An hour and a half before we were allowed to get in, there were lines and throngs on the street. Okay. The bars in the area, one right next to the TD Garden, on their big marquee, Caitlin Clark Watch Party. For people who couldn't get tickets, they were flooding the bars to watch Caitlin Clark on TV. This whole thing, this whole women's basketball juggernaut right now is due in large part to Caitlin Clark. And again, as Sophie Cunningham said, if you think that it isn't, then you're stupid. Okay. She point blank said it. She used some really colorful language, which I really admire because I'm chomping at the bit to use it myself, but I haven't been. So now there's some other movement that we have been seeing, and I think we've been seeing it on purpose. Okay. I've been looking at a lot of videos. I know that we have seen now Caitlin Clark taking long distance jump shots in practice. And you know something? We've seen the Indiana Fever winning without Caitlin Clark, which means there's less pressure on her to come back too quickly. But I don't think her return is that far off now. We had some jackasses out there in, YouTube land earlier in the week when she dedicated a basketball court out in the Midwest that was built for kids through her foundation. There was a scene of her kicking a soccer ball back at one of the kids. And as you know, Caitlyn Clark could have just as easily been a women's professional soccer player. And by the way, there is a women's professional soccer team coming to Boston, and Aaliyah Boston is an investor in that. Caitlyn Clark uh, wanted to invest in the one going into the Midwest. I believe it was Cincinnati, but they did not get a franchise this time around. So Caitlyn Clark played two sports, and she was a mad scorer in soccer. I mean, she was a mad scorer. It could have gone either way, but she chose to give up soccer to focus on basketball. All right. So there should be no doubt in anybody's mind that Caitlyn Clark wants to get back on the court. And I do not believe in any stretch of the imagination that she is gone for the year. In fact, I think her return is coming sooner rather than later. I'm not saying it's going to be tomorrow. I'm not saying it's going to be in 3 days. But I think by sometime between the 12th of August and maybe the 17th of August, we might see Caitlyn Clark back on the basketball court. But right now, with the Indiana Fever having won 4 in a row, she doesn't have to rush. And I think they were rushing her. I think she was rushing herself earlier in the season when they weren't doing so good. Okay? So that's what happens. Gang, listen. The Boston Celtics learned how to win when Larry Bird was injured. They learned how to win without him, but they are better with him. So people who are telling you, and you'll see it out there, it's all the people trying to stir the pot. That's what they do on social media. Social media is 90% bullshit and stirring the pot. All those people out there who are, quite frankly, misogynists, most of them are men, are out there saying that the Fever are better without Caitlyn Clark. That is absolute. I'm not even going to say it, okay? It's absolute bull, okay? That is absolutely not the case. But can they string together wins when they need to without her? Yes, they can, okay? And that means there's less pressure on the Fever to bring her back before she's completely rested, and there's less pressure on Caitlyn Clark to bring herself back. Okay. Now, anybody who has seen any of the games at all has seen Caitlyn Clark jumping off the chairs, jumping off the bench on the sidelines to argue with referees, jumping up in the air to celebrate when her team hits a three. Okay. She has been totally immersed in these games mentally. She is paying attention. She is watching the players she's going to end up playing with on the floor, watching what they're doing. And I really don't believe she's that far off now. Okay. I think the more time we can give her, the better it is. Okay. What we don't want is for her to be injured yet again. But I don't believe that they have any intention of shutting her down. And I don't believe that she has any intention of being out for the rest of the season. We still have a way to go. So that's where we are for tonight. And I think, I'm actually not the only person with this opinion. Robin Lundgren is also a person with this opinion, as I found tonight. Just before I made this video, I went and checked around and saw, trying to see if there was anything new going on, and there is, but that's for tomorrow's video. I'm going to tell you what it's going to be. But I did happen to stop and watch a Robin Lundgren video from a couple days ago, and he was actually saying the same thing, that he thinks that Caitlyn Clark is coming back sooner rather than later. I think she's fired up. I think she's ready to go. And I think the team will be happy to have her back. I absolutely do. I think all of the chatter about division and divisiveness, there's always going to be conflict in a team, as I've said, like there is in a family. Okay? That stuff gets taken care of in the locker room. It doesn't get taken care of in the media. So I think they're ready to go. I think she's ready to go. And I think we're going to see her soon. Now, I could be wrong, but I don't think I am. So what else is going on that we're going to talk about tomorrow? When I make my coffee, we're going to do a video, okay? And we're going to talk about the trade deadline. Because somewhere in the back of my head, I believe that the Indiana Fever are going to make a move. And as I told you before, Damaris Dantas is probably going to be someone they're trying to move. But there's some interesting twists here. They have floated 3 names of potential targets for the Fever. And we're going to talk about that tomorrow when I make my first video in the morning. So you guys have a great night. I think it's safe to start getting excited about seeing Caitlyn Clark again. And all of this movement, all of this excitement, all of the stuff that's going on with the league. Hey, Bear, that is the Caitlyn Clark effect, okay? We've seen it now for a couple of years, and I think women's pro basketball starts to grow here, and we'll get through the growing pains that we have. But I will reiterate this. These envious little chicks, they need to get over themselves, okay? This is the meal ticket, and it's time to ride this thing into the sunset. I will see you guys tomorrow. We'll talk about who the media is saying that is the people who the media is saying are potential targets for the Indiana Fever prior to the playoffs, before the trade deadline. You guys have a great night, and I will talk to you all soon.